It's often perceived that there's a division between clinical psychotherapy and spiritual self-inquiry, where psychotherapy focuses primarily on refining the self, integrating different aspects of our personhood, conscious and unconscious, the different hurts and wounds. Whereas spiritual self-inquiry aims to dissolve the self. Now, as I work with these different traditions, I've come to see how they overlap. And particularly when we compare Lacanian psychoanalytical psychotherapy with non-dual yoga and tantric yoga. All of these traditions are interested in the notion of the self. But how they explore it is something which is worth examining. And so that's what I'd like to do in today's video, is for us just to examine these traditions and look at them and how they compare one with the other. Asking the question of how Lacanian psychoanalysis can help us to heal. But then how do the processes of self-inquiry offered to us through yoga and tantra give us something more than that? Give us something which therapy can't. And then to see how these two seemingly different traditions can actually complement one another, and how that can be of use to us in our practice. Lacanian psychoanalysis challenges the very commonly held assumption that we, the self, is fixed and knowable. From a Lacanian perspective, the ego is not something which is true and stable. Rather, the ego is a construct, something which has been fabricated. The ego is a patchwork made up of different identifications and desires, all of which are supported and reinforced through language. Now, we don't have access to our deepest motivations, the motivations which shape how we experience our lives. These motivations have been influenced by our societies, our culture, and the language that we speak. And so, who we perceive ourselves to be is being influenced by all of this, all which we can refer to as the symbolic order. Now, this is important because a great deal of our suffering is as a consequence of our misidentifying with the ego. We cling to the narrative we have about ourselves. We cling to our personalities. And we'll do whatever it takes to sustain this image of who we believe ourselves to be. All the while, however, there are hidden forces at play which are motivating and determining how we experience ourselves in relation to life. These forces are unknown to us. They are not conscious. They are unconscious. Lacan uses the term the real to refer to everything which falls outside of symbolization. He uses the term the real to refer to that which is beyond the symbolic order. The real is that aspect of existence which can't be named, can't be quantified, can't be controlled or neatly packaged. Instead, the real is the raw, potent, unpredictable undercurrent of life itself. Now, there are moments when we come face to face with the real. And when we do, we can find it extremely uncomfortable because it disrupts our perception of who we are. When we come head to head with the real, when we encounter the real at different moments in our lives, we can find that the different narratives that we've put in place to hold together the imaginary idea of who we are become unraveled, or at least challenged. Now, this is where psychotherapy can be useful, because it allows us to recognize these unconscious forces and to work through them. It helps us to see where our suffering comes from as a consequence of clinging to our identifications and misinterpreting our own desires. Now, ultimately, psychoanalytical psychotherapy doesn't give you a fixed, stable self. In fact, it reveals to you that there is no fixed self. And in this way, psychoanalysis begins to overlap with non-dual self-enquiry. So what does non-dual self-enquiry have to add to this? Well, from a non-dual perspective, whether it be Advaita Vedanta or Tantra, the ego is not just a psychological construct, it's an illusion. And not only is our personal identity unstable, but our very sense of being a separate individual is a misperception. Here's where people often get confused. Non-duality is not saying that the world doesn't exist, that it's fake. The term illusion is being used to point towards the fact that how we usually perceive reality as a collection of separate things, separate people, separate experiences. This is a misperception. Reality is not divided. There's not a separate me and a separate world. There is one reality appearing in many forms. The self does not exist within reality. The self is reality. Advaita Vedanta expresses this through the phrase Tat Tvam Asi. You are that. You're not merely the mind, the ego, or the body. You are the very consciousness in which all of this arises. Tantra adds something extra to this. It doesn't just negate the world. While it agrees that yes, all of this is one, it also says that it's in this play of duality, in the self and the world of light and dark, that we experience the dance of reality itself. And so Tantra doesn't withdraw from the world and from life. Instead, it embraces it. It embraces the thoughts and the emotions and the sensations, acknowledging them as being different forms, different manifestations of that one underlying unified reality. So how do these two approaches, Lacanian psychoanalysis and non-dual self-enquiry, fit together? Many people on the spiritual path will bypass deep psychological work. They'll argue that, well, if all of this is an illusion, why would I get caught up in my own personal narrative? Why would I want to be rehashing things that have happened in my life? It's better for me to focus on the goal of realizing the self as an illusion. But this can, in practice, often lead to avoidance. And unattended wounds don't just disappear because you call them an illusion. And their effects don't just disappear because you call them an illusion. Now, on the other hand, for some, while engaging in psychotherapy, they may be striving to experience greater freedom by establishing a more fixed, stable sense of self. They might be engaging in the therapeutic work in a way where they're clinging to this sense of self which is dependable. And for them, the therapeutic process will only really begin to function when they see that freedom will be found as soon as they let go of their need to find a fixed sense of self. This is where I see the two approaches, psychoanalysis and self-inquiry, coming together. Psychoanalysis can help us to see through our unconscious patterns and our misidentifications. Psychoanalysis can help us to begin to appreciate the unstable, unfixed nature of the self. Self-inquiry then can take us a step further, helping us to see through the illusion of the self as being separate. Now, it's not a case of one replacing the other. Sometimes we need to engage in psychological work, to work through our own personal history, integrating different traumas, wounds, hurts of the past, if we are going to be able to engage in the process of contemplative self-inquiry in a meaningful way. So maybe at this point, the real question worth asking yourself is, what are you struggling with? If you find yourself entangled in unconscious patterns, repeating the same desires and experiencing the same frustrations, then Lacanian psychoanalysis can be a profound tool. Not to help you to create some solid identity, but rather to expose the manner in which you construct your identity through language, through desire, and through the unconscious. The psychoanalytical approach allows for something new to emerge beyond the rigid ego. If your struggle isn't so much about psychological patterns, but is more about a deeper sense of existential limitation, where your sense of being feels bound to and confined by your self, by your personality self, your ego self, then self-inquiry can provide a radical shift. Instead of working within the character, within the self, it invites you to see through the very idea of selfhood itself. The key is not in choosing one path over the other, but instead in recognizing where your suffering might be arising from. For some, there may be a need to disentangle themselves from the different ways that their unconscious can trap them before they set about engaging in a process of contemplative self-inquiry. For others, a sincere, dedicated engagement in the practice of self-inquiry might lead to their being able to dissolve the very unconscious trappings that therapy aims to work through. Both these paths open doors, but which door you step through will depend on where you're standing right now. I'd very much like to hear your thoughts. How have psychotherapy and self-inquiry shaped your understanding of yourself? And we can continue this conversation in the comment section below. If you liked this video, please like and share it, and subscribe to this channel if you'd like to be part of our future explorations on yoga, psychology, and philosophy. Take care.